Swimming like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank, coming to you virtually from Seattle in the Pacific Northwest. Listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this here is the podcast for you. This is where we say street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello, I'm Dan Whedon, along with this week's co-host, James Alberson. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube. James, we're ubiquitous. We come to you from about a dozen cities, including Atlanta, Charleston, South Carolina, where a lot of golf's going on this weekend, and Central PA. Today, our guest is Shelley Golden, founder of Shelley Golden Style. We're going to welcome Shelley in just a minute. We're going to talk a little bit with James before we do. But James, we're going to find out today how you and I can look way better on Zoom. How's that sound?
Sounds good. I imagine we're probably going to focus more on you, Dan.
Probably. Yeah, focus is the operative word, James. It's the operative word. Hey, listen, buddy, I got a story that I've been dying to tell since this morning.
Okay.
So Wednesday mornings is when I go for a run, and I run kind of in the area that I live, and on my route is a latte stand. You like lattes?
I'm just a regular drip coffee type of man, but
Well, you might have found yourself, if you were in desperate need of a latte, you might have found, and you were in Paulsville, you might have found yourself here. And look, they have this sign out. And it's it's like a dry erase board type sign, and they put their special in. And I noticed, first of all, visually, that they had Mr. Peanut. You know who Mr. Peanut is?
Mr. Peanut of the Planters Peanut.
The Planters, Mr.
Right?
Peanut. He's doffing his top hat. He's got the monocle. He's got, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think they discontinued him though, but yes,
well, he's made it. Well, at least he's on a perfect representation of him. Here was the problem: is I saw it, James. It said their special was a Cracker Jack latte, and I started thinking to myself, that this is Mr. Peanut. It's not the Cracker. That's not the Cracker Jack logo. I wanted to run back in and go to the latte maker and say, you got the wrong brand. You're not making a peanut latte. You're making a Cracker Jack. You need the little kid, right, in the sailor suit. You remember Cracker Jack, James?
Yeah, I was trying to think of the logo until you just said the kid in the sailor suit. But maybe he was talking about the Cracker Jacks with peanuts. Didn't they used to have peanuts?
Yeah, but they didn't have Mr. Peanut. That's my point. Mr. Peanut was for the roasted peanuts, right?
This is true, but like I say, they let Mr. Peanut go. I imagine he still needs to put food on his plate, so he landed a deal with Cracker Jack.
He's got to do it as Mr. Peanut. So here's my whole point. Here's my point. There was a mismatch of brand, right? Somebody thought, this is my thinking. Somebody thought that Mr. Peanut was the brand, was the logo for Cracker Jack. They missed the whole point. They obviously didn't get Cracker Jack as I did as a kid, looking for the prize inside. So Brent, would you agree, you're in the sales training world, brand and image is important?
Oh, absolutely. Man, that was almost like the Rachel Maddow show there, Dan. You took a long way around to get to that point. I do agree. I do agree
you're not
that
calling me Rachel
brand and
Maddow.
image
Okay,
are important.
Well, the reason I took all that, because number one, I found it interesting. If I find something interesting, there I go. But I thought it would be a great segue. Shelley Golden is here with Shelley Golden Style. Shelley, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing? I love your story of Mr. Peanut with stick. I'm like, what does that have to do with Cracker Jacks? I just didn't get it myself.
See, there's that disconnect. But listen, I have to ask you, your business is about connecting disconnects because, here we've been living on Zoom since March of 2020. Not that it wasn't here before, but we've all been, for all intents and purposes, living on it. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people who have a disconnect with their company image and brand because they show up on a laptop facing straight up their nostrils, and they don't look like their image. You founded your company kind of pivoted. I would love to help James and I understand how COVID actually created a shift, a pivot in your business, and talk about the image part of it.
Okay, well, as we all know, COVID hit and all of a sudden everybody's on Zoom. It is, whether it's Zoom or WebEx or Team, as a matter of fact, both Zoom and Google Meet both increased usership over 50% within just like 5 months, the first 5 months of Zoom. So it's like staggering amount of people. It went from 100 million to from 10 million to 300 million users on Zoom. It was just crazy amount. But anyhow, so the first, right at the very beginning, actually, let's just step back one little bit. Right before COVID, I met a woman and she's like, hey, let's do a workshop together. I'm like, sure, I could do a workshop together. She was a business coach. I'm an image consultant. I've been doing this on and off for, I'm going to just say 20 plus years. And our first day to talk about it was the day California closed. So it's like, ooh, okay, well, I could help people look their best in their Zoom box. And that's how it started, just with lighting, with their hair. I'm a certified color consultant. So what color works best on you in the space that you're in, makeup. And it was a thing. People found it really fascinating. So I started helping people. And over the past, let's say 15 months, it's now 90% of my business.
That is amazing.
So I've come up with this 5-step process that I call the Zoom Makeover. And I've been promoting the Zoom Makeover. It's camera angle, lighting, because are you in the light? Are you in the dark? You know, lighting is the very first thing people notice about you. Background. What does your background say about you? You know, are you in your kitchen? Are you in your garage? Are you in your basement? People notice it. And the reality is, this is your new business card. Also, the next step, 4th step, is what color clothing works best on you in your space. And step 5 for women and those who wear makeup, what Zoom specific makeup to really create a 3-dimensional look on this 2-dimensional platform. And I really try to counterbalance all that blue light that comes off of your monitor. So this is what I've created. I work with individuals. I've been working with companies, and we'll talk about how I'm working with companies in a little bit.
So Shelley, I'm curious, when you kind of delve into this area where a lot of people weren't prepared, they took it for granted. I'm curious, what would you say, did you find were the biggest ahas that people realized when you actually got involved with this Zoom makeover, where it didn't occur to them?
3 things. Not that I had the 3 things, pre-prepared. It just popped into my head, to be honest with you. The first thing, as I mentioned, is lighting. So many people are in the dark, or they're dark on half of their face. So lighting is the most important thing. And you really want to have the lighting even on your face, left and right. Reason being, the main achievement that my main goal, should I say, is I try to make it look like you and I are just sitting across the table having a conversation. Because if you and I were sitting across the table, you wouldn't be looking up my nose. You wouldn't be looking at my ceiling. You wouldn't have, chances are I wouldn't be in shadow. So that's the first thing that's really important. The second one is camera angle, and that's kind of looking up your nose. How many times are you looking at somebody in their Zoom box and you're looking up their nose, or you're looking on top of their head, and their head is like this little floating head at the bottom of the box. It's like this little floating head down there. So the camera angle, which is kind of step 1 of my Zoom makeover, is also, it's a super important issue. You want your camera angle straight out in front of your eyes, if not just a tiny bit higher, so that it's forcing you to open your eyes a little bit. Whereas if the camera were a little bit lower than your eyes, then you get the puppy dog look. So you want people to see your eyes. You want them to see your face. You want them to also see your torso. So you want a little bit of space above your head. And you want the bottom of the box, as I call it. For women, I often say above the nipple line, because you don't want your boobs at the bottom of the box. They're going to look bigger than they actually are, unless, of course, that's what you want. And for men, you could have the bottom of the box at your diaphragm. And the reason that's important, the positioning, so lighting, positioning, is so that people can see your torso and read all your nonverbal communication, because that's what we're missing. And we are Zoom fatigued, because one of the reasons we're Zoom fatigued is it's so difficult to process all the nonverbal communication just from whatever somebody's allowing us to see, especially if we only see their head. Whereas if we could at least see their torso, we can read some of their nonverbal communication, and it makes the whole interaction easier. And the last thing is, so the third thing is what color clothing you're wearing. You know, if you're in a dark room and you're wearing black, nobody's going to see you. If you're sitting against a white wall and you're wearing something light, even if it's light blue, light pink, it's going to look white. Nobody will see you. And you really want people to be able to see you so that you're in the foreground. And again, it makes it easier for them to read your nonverbal communication. It then becomes subliminal, as opposed to having to focus on, gee, I wonder if they want to speak. I wonder if they seem interested. It's very clear. So one, lighting, positioning, color clothing.
All right. Hey, so Shelley, let me ask this, because you talked about being in the dark, and James and I do not want to be in the dark. That's for sure. But when this started, I mean, I can remember, and again, I know Zoom was around. I was using it beforehand, but something happened. And when we got started, really after March of 2020, people were doing Zoom, but I know that they saw themselves. I know that they all looked at themselves and saw, man, nobody can see my face. What went, I guess I'm trying to think, we're all professionals at some level. What were people thinking that they weren't at least trying to figure out, I got to make myself look better? Or is that just me? It just seemed like everybody just got to getting on Zoom and went forward and didn't really have a clue of how to make themselves look better.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what happened. And when one of the big problems with that was engagement and really elevating your brand. Right. You're sitting in your pajamas and your sweatpants, and it's like, oh, I can just wear a t-shirt, because first of all, we're only going to be here for 6 weeks.
That's right.
Right. So this became the 6-week uniform, and then it became the 2-month uniform, and then it became the 6-month uniform. And so people really were not invested in how they show up. And then I think, they're like, okay, I guess we're here. Then companies started coming up with guidelines. Okay, you need to turn your camera on. You need to not have your baseball cap on so we can't see your face. You can't be in bed. If you're wearing a hoodie, take the hood off, please. Will you please? So companies started coming up with guidelines. Actually, even one of my clients is now one of the new directors at the National Institute of Health. And we did as an image consultant, I did a whole image makeover with her hair color, glasses, clothing, her Zoom space. What was she going to wear for her initiation in her swearing in ceremony? And the NIH actually gave guidelines of what she needs to wear on her Zoom swearing in. You know, so guidelines really help. And I've been working with companies on how they can have guidelines, how they work with the people, that you want to have the camera at a certain angle, what lights to buy. Because especially if you wear glasses, like I wear glasses, Dan, you wear glasses, James, you're wearing glasses. You don't want circles in your eyes. You need to have light on your face, but you don't want reflection in your glasses. So what type of light, how to position the lights, these are all important for pieces of information that companies are starting to share with their employees.
Well, you know what? That's great information, but we have to share right now, sharing a little bit of the stage with our commercial sponsor. We're going to take a short break to hear from today's spotlight sponsor. And when we come back with our guest, Shelley Golden with Shelley Golden Style, for our Hot or Not section of the show, we're going to find out if she thinks using your cell phone on a Zoom call is hot or not. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Sandler Training specializes in ongoing training, coaching, and consulting to help companies increase their top and bottom line results. As a business owner or leader, are you completely frustrated with the lack of consistent performance from your salespeople? Concerned the team is not putting enough new strong opportunities in the pipeline? Disappointed at your team's inability to create value instead of selling on price? Or fed up with losing valuable margin due to unnecessary price discounting? If the end result of these and other challenges is a roller coaster ride of performance, consistently missed sales forecasts, or stagnant business growth, Sandler may be the fit for you. Sandler works with sales leaders and their sales team to refine their selling process, put key management processes in place, and improve execution to create sustained, improved performance and results. Check us out at www.toptier.sandler.com.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm James Albertson, your co-host, and we're here today with our guest, Shelley Golden of Shelley Golden Style, for the next segment, Hot or Not.
And for Hot or Not, Shelley, James and I are going to pepper you with questions about business, about life, about Zoom. And you're going to tell us whether that topic or concept is hot or not. And I hate to tell you, but at the end, you win absolutely nothing. So
Okay.
as I prefaced going in, hot or not, Shelley, using your cell phone for a Zoom call.
If you don't have to, don't do it. I'll tell you why. I would say it's not hot. When you're with other people who are on their computer, you have a horizontal rectangular box, like a landscape portrait. And all of a sudden, when you use your phone, you're in a vertical portrait, and it just disrupts the rhythm of your eye, and it's causing more Zoom fatigue. So with that, Dan, it is not hot.
All right, Shelley, hot or not, shutting off your Zoom video during a presentation while the presenter is speaking?
Okay. Actually, I think that's okay. I think that's absolutely okay. I'm going to give that a thumbs up. I'll tell you why. One of the things that we are really working with during this COVID period and post-COVID is Zoom fatigue. And Stanford University did a study on Zoom fatigue, and one of their recommendations is turn your video off. So either that you're hiding yourself, so you're not looking at yourself, or people aren't looking at you, because being on camera all the time, even if you're just a participant, is stressful. It's like being on stage all day long. So yes, turn your camera off. It'll give you a break. Even though you're listening, you can make your lunch, you can do some errands, do whatever you're doing. do a little multitasking, I'm good with that. That's a thumbs up.
All right, that's interesting. I wonder if the presenters will think that as well, but you bring up some good points. Okay, here's another one. Hot or not, speaking of looking at yourself, hot or not, using your image as a mirror, fixing your hair and things like that during a Zoom meeting.
Okay, that is a very interesting topic. That like brings out all kinds of other thoughts.
I see it a lot.
I know it's really not the right platform. I'm going to just say, no, that is not hot, James, to actually be preening yourself during a Zoom meeting. On the other hand, what's happening, according to this Stanford University Zoom fatigue study, women who are more than twice as fatigued than men. And because they're looking at themselves all day long. Plastic surgery is up 60% because mostly from women, with the impetus that they've looked at themselves on their Zoom camera all day long and thought, oh man, I need to do something about this. So people are looking, but I don't think you really need to put lipstick on and brush your hair. It's not a mirror, unless of course it's just you and it's before you get on the call.
Well, I know that James regularly on Zoom calls is fixing his hair. Shining that baby up. Okay, I got a hot or not for you. And as I'm sitting here, James and I know this is bad radio, but James and I have our Shrimp Tank podcast backgrounds. So hot or not, Shelley, Zoom backgrounds?
Awesome question. And then I just want to go back a little bit. First of all, I have to tell you, I'm always like putting my hair back with, on this side, because if I don't, the shadow, my hair, falls in my face, and then you can't see my eyes. Okay, Zoom backgrounds. Some people need Zoom backgrounds. It's your branding, as long as it's not super distracting. So one of the things I say is if you put your hands up, like, okay, hold your hands up, hold them up. That's kind of where you want your logo to be. And that's kind of where you have your logos. Although personally, I would have both of your heads a little higher to the top of the box.
James, we got to stop slouching. That's it.
Yeah, you need to. Actually, one of the things that I like about your virtual background, it's not just a solid color. So virtual backgrounds, you don't want anything really super bright that's going to be distracting. You don't want anything moving like palm trees or animals moving around. Reason being, your Zoom background is not the main event. You're the main event. And if you want to increase engagement with the person you're talking to and really to elevate your brand, you need to be the main event. So your virtual Shrimp Tank background. So even though it's solid color, but you've got this lovely wave on the top, and you've got the branding always in the same place. It's subtle. It's not in your face. I mean, I could see it's the Shrimp Tank, but it's actually a very nice branding. On the other hand, James, I cannot read Sandler training, the black wording on the blue background.
Yes, we discussed that, so we're going to do something about that.
All right, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
I appreciate it. Thank you for saying the name again. Hey, you know what? There's some
Sandler training. There you go.
So hot or not, you mentioned it a couple of times, and I think I know the answer, but hot or not, Zoom fatigue. And in your answer, kind of expound a little bit on what you're doing as it relates to relieving us of that fatigue.
Okay, so Zoom fatigue is real. Like I mentioned before, that Stanford University did the study. And the reason I keep bringing this up is because when I read the study, it hit me in the face like a wet rag. I was like, wow, oh my God. Because there's just so much, we're sitting here all day long, we're looking at ourselves. It's like being on stage. Women are more Zoom fatigued than men. By more than twice as much. 1 out of every 7 women is Zoom fatigued. 1 out of every 20 men are Zoom fatigued. So what I'm doing is I've put together a webinar, a masterclass, and I'm speaking to companies. I'm going into companies, working with them, speaking to organizations, what's causing Zoom fatigue and what you could do to alleviate it. It's interactive. I also have a lot of information on Zoom. Zoom actually partnered with Caltrix, research organization, and they interviewed over 10,000 people over 7,000 people in 10 countries on what they see the future is going to be and how much they're planning to use virtual conferencing. And in the US, 65% of companies and businesses, not just companies, but businesses, are planning to use a hybrid of both in-person and virtual. Putting together just virtual and this hybrid, it's a whopping 72% of types of businesses are going to be using video conferencing going in the future. So in terms of our Zoom fatigue, it's real. We need to understand what you can do to eliminate it, who it's affecting. For example, women, people who are more anxious, introverts, people of color are actually more Zoom fatigued. And so I have this webinar, and I'm going out on the road and working with companies to help them with their employees to really help people settle into this new way of doing business.
Well, we'll make sure that you at the end today will talk about how people can take part in that webinar. So my question is this, you mentioned in your 5 areas in the beginning, the 5th one, you kind of said, well, primarily for women, it's makeup. Now, listen, when I did my LinkedIn learning courses, they had to do a lot of work on me with makeup. I can tell you, man, they had to make me look better than I was. In fact, my wife, Barb, said, what kind of makeup they use? I don't know. They just put stuff on my face. So my question is should James and I be using makeup when we're doing these Zoom calls or these Zoom podcasts or whatever we're doing on Zoom? Do men need makeup?
Okay, great question. Looking at you right now, Dan, I think you're good.
Oh gosh, I was nervous, James, when she said, I'm looking at you now. I thought it was all down.
Oh yeah, Rosie, you got a rosy cheek thing going on. So
you got rosy cheeks. You don't have any shine. You're good. James, let's chat for just a little bit.
Sure.
Your turn, James.
Okay. You've been polishing that head just a little bit too much.
It's the natural oil.
I know. So I could also see that you have ceiling lights on. And because this is very common with men who don't have hair on their head, or sometimes people have oily faces, you either want to, cover the light over your head. You could diffuse the light with paper. There's actually light diffusers that you could buy online. You also might want to put a little powder on your face because I feel that you're a little bit shiny. And the reason I'm saying just powder is because one of the things that I try to help people do is eliminate distractions. So that you can just engage, it's just an easy conversation. If there's distractions of like reflection in your glasses, reflection on your forehead, reflection on your nose or your cheeks, those are distractions, and people go, oh, wow, yeah, okay, yeah, I see it. Right. But if it's not there, it's not there. And then they're just focusing on you and what you're saying.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, in order to light the place, they're not overhead lights, but they're ring lights and things like that. So the diffuser is a good idea. We'll look into that, and I'll just try and have my wife make me up with a little powder, a little foundation, maybe.
Okay.
Oh, she's gonna love that, man. She's gonna love that.
All right. I have a cheap and easy hack for you, and Dan knows this one. Mm-hmm. If you take bright fuchsia and bold, yellow Post-its, not the original yellow Post-its, but like a fuchsia and a bright yellow Post-it, and you put them over your lights, it'll actually help diffuse the light and give you give your complexion a better, more natural color. Cheap and easy. I've got 2 lights on the left and 2 lights on the right. And I have fuchsia and yellow Post-its kind of on my lights.
Staples, here I come. Okay.
Here you go. It's cheap and easy.
Well, you know what else is cheap and easy is going to our second commercial. So we are going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors. And when we come back with Shelley Golden, with Shelley Golden Style for our famous Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're going to find out if Shelley says yes to the dress. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors, Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, Kitsap Sun Newspaper. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. And now we have our next segment, Plead the Fifth. We have our guest, Shelley Golden of Shelley Golden Style. Dan, why don't you start it off?
So Plead the Fifth, James and I are going to turn up the heat a little bit. We may ask some tougher questions, and you get to plead the fifth, but only once. So if you plead the fifth early, we'll be able to start throwing some darts at you here, Shelley.
All right.
And again, at the end, you win absolutely nothing. So you heard me kind of tease out saying yes to the dress. So, I think James and I are about the same age. You might be a little bit younger than us, Shelley, but I'm just going to say this. I remember getting started in business, and we were always told to dress for where you want to be, not where you are. It's kind of an old school thing. Plead the Fifth. Has that changed today and I'm talking not just about Zoom, but you're an image consultant. Overall, is it more relaxed as far as how we should be dressing for business?
Awesome question. There is a huge mambo divide in this country. It's called the Mississippi. and if you are east of the Mississippi, there's one rule. There's one thought. If you are west of the Mississippi, there's another another thought. So if you're east of the Mississippi, it's just so much more formal. Yes, kind of the dress for success, dress for where you want to go, absolutely pertains to east of the Mississippi. West of the Mississippi, all rules are off. On the other hand, there's also yet another divide. It's kind of the 45 to 50-year-old. Are you older or are you younger? So anybody that's older still has the old school ways in their mind. Anybody that's, again, there's kind of this gray zone of 45 to 50. If you're 45 and younger, they think it doesn't really matter how I dress. I can still wear a hoodie. There's a little bit of, age and location that is determining all those different answers. Just because I work with all different types of people, and I've lived on the East Coast, I've lived on the West Coast. I've also lived in Europe for 10 years and the Middle East for another 4 years. So I have a very broad perspective of how people dress and their mentality. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
That was it depends.
I thought it answered it very completely, actually, and left us right back where we started. But that's kind of how it is.
Okay. In my opinion, just to finish this off, in my opinion, you really want to dress for that position you want. Absolutely. Look at the way your boss is dressing. Look at the way the 45-year-olds are dressing, whether you're 25 or whether you're 65. look at the way the 45-year-olds are dressing, especially for men.
Makes sense. All right, plead the fifth. If you had the opportunity to basically relive your career life, what would you do and why?
I love what I do. This is what I do. I wouldn't do anything different. I have wanted to do this since I was 19 years old. I don't think I wanted to do Zoom makeovers, you know, that certainly wasn't in my dreams, but, you know, really working with people to help them feel confident and elevate their brand, you know, so they can attract the people that they want to attract, whether it's into the business wise, socially, you know, their love life. You know, that's what brings me joy. And that's what I am super passionate about.
All right. So I'm hoping this plead the fifth might make you squirm a little bit more. We'll see.
All right.
Plead the fifth, Shelley. Which gender, men or women, are more difficult to accept your advice on making changes to their appearance, to the lighting, to everything?
Well, who's more difficult?
Yeah, men or women. Who find it more who do you find more difficult to be more reticent to make changes, maybe?
You know, I'm going to plead the fifth on that one because it's actually kind of a 50-50, to be honest with you.
I just didn't know if you know, if the gender made a determination on who is more likely to make changes.
On the other hand, to answer that, men don't approach me as much. Women are more interested in general on how they look in their Zoom box. Men don't approach me as much, but when I'm working with a man, they're like putty.
There we go. We're putty, James.
So therefore, she just answered the question.
She did.
And you also answered the question, which we already knew, why there's so much more Zoom fatigue in women, because they care more about how they look on the screen. And they're also the ones typically fixing their hair. And I always say, you look fine. You look fine.
Actually, there's actually a couple other reasons why women are Zoom fatigued. They take less breaks. Their Zoom sessions are longer. And there's a number of other ones, but one of the ones that I think is absolutely fascinating is that on average, women spend about 15 more hours per week than men tending to household and childcare responsibilities. So that is, you know, by the time, even though they're already more Zoom fatigued on camera, then they have all these other responsibilities. So it's kind of life fatigue, Zoom fatigue exacerbated.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
All right, so here may be, well, you already technically pleaded the fifth, even though you answered the question after you pleaded the fifth. All right. You'd make a horrible witness on trial, I guess. But plead the fifth. What show do you binge watch?
I'm going to plead the fifth on that one.
Oh.
Is she allowed to do that, Dan?
I don't know if she, well, I'm going to let her, because she did answer them. I don't know if I've ever had somebody plead the fifth on binge watching shows.
No, okay. Well, I was really, you know, totally into Outlander.
Okay.
I just thought that was awesome. First of all, I'm a costume historian, so and I've made costumes and designed costumes for theater. And so, yeah, the costumes were awesome. The sets were awesome. The script was awesome. And you know, I'm just not going to just talk about the characters, and you know, it was just all awesome.
Wow. So she's now twice, James, gone from pleading the fifth to actually answering the question. That's okay. You have to catch this one though. So I'm asking everybody that in this year, all of our guests, and so you're going to get this one too. I know you love your work, Shelley. You express that, but I'm taking you away from it. You've got to start a new business based on a hobby. What would that new business be based on one of your hobbies?
Well, I thought this was my hobby.
See, let's pretend it's not. Pick a different hobby. You got something else, because that's a great answer, by the way. But do you have some other thing that you do that you'd say, okay, I'd start my business doing that?
No. I don't. I honestly couldn't think of one other thing
right.
that I would want to do.
That's fair. That's fair. So, okay. So I get a second one. James, can I ask her a second one then?
Go for
Okay.
it. Go for
All
it.
right. Rewind.
Right. No,
Here we
that's
go.
fine. You're at a dinner party. When we get to do dinner parties again, which we're getting close to doing, you're at a dinner party and you're sitting next to someone you don't know. What's the first thing you say to them to start a meaningful conversation, a genuine, meaningful conversation?
A genuinely meaningful conversation. Boy, it depends on the context of you know, quite often it kind of depends on the context. Sometimes I'll ask, you know, I hate the "what do you do" question. You know, so many people hate the what do you do" question.
Right.
Sometimes I talk about travel.
Okay.
Because I've done a ton of traveling since I lived overseas for 15 years. So sometimes that's a really awesome, easy in question for me.
Gotcha. Okay.
That people love to
their hobby. Yeah, you ask them about their hobby.
So
then they're going to ask me, "What's your hobby?"
Yeah, you don't want that one then.
What's the difference? What's your hobby? What do you do? What's your hobby? What do you do?
So Shelley, one last question from me. I'm curious if anyone comes to mind that you gave them your advice on whether it's a Zoom makeover or a style makeover, that ultimately they came back to you and said, man, I won't say changed their life. That's a bit, maybe a little hyperbole, but somebody who was extremely grateful at you coming in and really just setting your advice, your doing what you did for them, kind of changed the trajectory of how they kind of went forward and things like that. Anybody come to mind?
Oh, yes. I had a client, and young 30-something-year-old, really pretty woman. And she worked in a tech company in Silicon Valley. And she dressed really conservatively. And she went to a comedy show. And the comedian said, "Hey, who's the librarian in the front row?" And somebody else also, like a week later, said, "Who's the librarian?" or something like that. This woman's feeling really like the librarian. And then we did kind of a whole wardrobe image overhaul. And then she got comments on being the best dressed woman in the office.
Wow.
So that's the huge. And I had a similar experience with a woman who lost 120 pounds. We did a whole new wardrobe for this woman with her new body. You know, so here this woman, you know, kind of was looking like a tent, and also got a compliment that you are the best dressed woman in the office.
No, two good answers. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, Shelley Golden, we appreciate you being a guest here on the Shrimp Tank as we come to the end. I like to say our carriage is about to turn into a pumpkin, but before it does, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who want to follow up, learn more about you. How do they go about getting more information, getting in touch with you?
I will tell you that, but I just have one more story on Zoom Makeover. I worked with a company. I did a company-wide 120 people Zoom session with them, and their company won a huge account based on the fact that the company hiring them thought that everybody looked good online, you know, compared to a competition. So that's the power of really up-leveling how you look online. You can get in touch with me two different ways. You can email me directly. My email address is Shelley with an EY, SHELLEY. So Shelley at ShelleyGoldenStyle.com, or you can check out my website at www.ShelleyGoldenStyle.com. And those are two different ways you can get in touch with me. Zoom makeovers, Zoom fatigue, image, how to present yourself, how to show up, how to attract people that you want to attract.
All right, sounds good. And on that note, We do want to thank you. We want to remind everybody to check out the replay of this show and other shows on shrimptank.com/Seattle. And of course, you can listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. As Dan mentioned, we're all over, whether it's Spotify or Apple or Google Play or ones I've never heard of. I hear we're even playing somewhere on the Mars rover. Wherever you get it, you can hear the replays, and we invite you to, well, basically listen to this show and as many as possible. And and our social media pages: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Make sure to follow the Shrimp Tank wherever you can find us. Dan?
James, remember, you're supposed to ask your daughter about Spotify. Just remember that. You're going to,
that's right.
You're going to get
right.
that.
I'll work on
by
that.
the next time you come back, you will. So listen, everybody, Shelley, thank you very much. Our next show will be on Wednesday, June 16th at noon Pacific time. Our guest will be Rick Darrow. Rick is the CEO of Liberty Bank in Paulsboro, Washington. Phil Simchich is going to be my co-host. We're going to ask Rick to talk a little bit about the state of community banks on the heels of the PPP and a whole bunch of other things. Please make sure you tune in June 16th, 2021 at noon for the next Shrimp Tank. But in the meantime, please be safe, be well, of course, be prosperous, because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.